All right, everybody. So thanks everyone for joining the webinar. My name is Tyson, so I hope you guys just noticed that this webinar is now being recorded. So everyone who has joined or will join kind of later in the call, I will be sending out a link to this recording right after. So you should expect that by the end of the day. So kind of just wanted to touch base with everybody kind of as an agenda of what we have. Um, for this meeting, I really just kind of want to dive in for everything kind of InDesign related. So we're going to go through a practice InDesign file. I'm going to kind of walk through step by step how to get it imported and basically just give as many tips as I can for actually making edits, common errors that I've seen, working with a ton of other InDesign files, and just trying to make the import process a lot easier. From there, we'll kind of jump into templates and kind of some best practices for locking, adding smart fields, and basically just converting to brand templates. So I know a lot of people on this call today. I think we have 12 people have joined. So we've had a lot of customers who've registered today that are brand new, so they're kind of learning the InDesign import process. We also have customers who have been here for almost a year. So hopefully, regardless where you're at kind of in this Elusive stage, you'll be able to take something new from it. Just know that some sections maybe you're like, oh, I already know how to import something. Later on, it'll kind of be useful. The other thing I want to point out is even if you don't have any InDesign files, you'll still get a lot of good tips on actually creating templates and kind of doing all the different lock settings. So just bear with us kind of at the beginning, and then towards the end, you'll have more kind of those initial insights. For the goal, kind of as a base for every webinar that we're going to be doing is really kind of to take your designs to the next level. So a lot of this call is really not just to discuss InDesign and some errors that don't come through, but really we want to focus on helping all the different templates and getting it into Elusive. Truly what we know is that templates are transformative only because they're actually scalable. You guys still get to design in InDesign or do something that you're actually really good at, and then take those designs, import it into Elusive, and convert them to templates so that the rest of your team can then use that design, and it's a lot more scalable for everybody. So that's kind of our main insight for today, is just kind of giving this brief overview of templates. So I've already kind of outlined this a little bit, but we're going to do some introductions, import process, making edits, add locking, and then converting to a template. So kind of as I mentioned at the beginning, my name is Tyson. I'm on the professional services team kind of within customer success. So I know I've helped onboard a lot of you guys. So you guys are kind of here as the just back again to kind of hear what I have about InDesign. If you guys have any additional questions, I also have my email down there at the bottom, so feel free to reply. You guys can kind of just reach out to me, and if it's anything InDesign related, I feel like I've seen it all, so I'll be able to help with that. If you guys have any questions as we're going through the webinar, what I'm going to try to do is try to give moments where I'll try to review something and then just kind of give it time where if you do have a question, you can answer, ask that question. If you don't want to forget that question, I know down at the bottom, kind of where all the different controls are for the webinar, there's a spot where you can chat. So if you just click that chat button, you can type in your question. And what's nice is I get an alert, so I can make sure that we kind of stop and answer that. So I think that's probably your best way, is just kind of communicate through the chat button, and then we'll try to open it up and you can unmute yourself and kind of ask your question. So let's kind of dive in, and I'm gonna just share my screen, and we're just gonna run through an InDesign file start to finish. So let's see if I move this over. We're just gonna log into Elusive. So this is my account that I use. I have an awesome Help Center document that I use to kind of play around and test certain things out. So for this InDesign import, any import that you do will be up here in the top left. It's just this InDesign button, and this nice window will kind of walk you through either converting your file if the InDesign file is not in the correct format to actually converting it to an IDML. If you guys need additional instructions about that, I will be sending an email right after this webinar with kind of some other helpful links for you guys, and that will be included if you do need additional instructions on actually how to package your InDesign file. So we're going to click continue. We're going to select the IDML version of our file. And on this one, we're just going to use a real estate flyer that I created. So we're just going to click the IDML, and then it's just going to upload, and then we're going to open it. And then while this loads, what I typically see is, with every single import, you'll get this message box, which helps you upload any missing fonts and then any missing images for the specific file. You can tell on this one, I'm not missing any fonts, and that's just because I've uploaded this file before. And so all of those fonts are automatically matching. And from what I've seen with all of the imports that I've done, fonts are probably the biggest pain point. So if you have any fonts where you're uploading them or they're already in your account and constantly you're doing InDesign import and the font is not matching, please reach out to either me or our support team or your CSM, and we can work with you guys to kind of get those to match. Fonts are very tricky because you have kind of three different sources. You have InDesign, how they're kind of interpreting the font. You have the actual font file, and then you also have how Lucipress is interpreting the font. So kind of all these three different sources really just make a clash and kind of make it very hard to make a really easy way for our developers to identify a font. But I actually have on my computer a font editor where I can open the font file, I can edit it so that whatever Lucipress wants it to be, I just kind of edit it so that it actually matches in Lucipress. So if that is the case for you, shoot me an email and we'll take a closer look at those fonts. I know those are probably the biggest pain points. For images, we're just going to click upload. And if you package your InDesign file, you'll get a nice folder with all of your fonts, a folder with all of your links, which is where all of your images are located. So I'm just going to come in here and select all of the images. And I made this file on purpose with an EPS file. I know in the graphic design world, EPS is a very common file type. I run into it every day. EPS images are not supported in Lucipress. And that's just because a lot of, web-based platforms like Lucipress, for whatever reason, EPS is just not secure enough, and it just causes a lot of issues. So if you do have EPS files, I just recommend in the future as you're designing in InDesign, just keep it as a PNG or a JPEG, or you can also keep it as a SVG, which kind of maintains that vector format. So if you do one of those three, it's going to come in and kind of make the import a lot easier. So I'm going to click open, and Lucipress will start matching all of the different images except for that EPS image. So we'll just kind of wait right here. So the EPS images won't match. So you're just going to have to manually either drag and drop it from your computer or just replace it with an existing image already in Lucipress. I do want to point out as well, just give out as many tips as I can. We support technically Photoshop, Illustrator, and PDF files. Those will upload into Lucipress, along with TIFF files is what I've seen. Some customers have a ton of those. Typically, though, those file formats, when they're being imported to Lucipress, we will automatically convert those to JPEGs. So sometimes if you're like looking at them and you're like, why does this image, like the color looks so off, or like it just looks different. It's generally because it's one of those other formats where we're just converting it to a JPEG and the conversion is probably not the best. So if you have other file formats like that, again, I just recommend PNG, JPEG, SVGs. So we're going to click continue, and this is what the file will look like when it's first imported to Lucipress. So a couple things to note. One is I love Star Wars. I'm very pumped for the new movie that's coming out. So I try to have fun and incorporate a little bit of Star Wars into the work life, you know. Plus buttons over here will quickly indicate to you if you have text that's inside of a box, but the box isn't quite big enough. As of, I think, last week, our engineers are looking into the plus button so that, you know, let's say with this one, if I click on it, it expanded a little bit, but it didn't fully expand it as much as I need it to go. So our engineers are actually looking into this. I have my fingers crossed that they can really, really improve that plus button so that it just fully expands the text. So we'll kind of keep you guys posted on that, but I know they are working on it. The other thing that you'll see are red triangles, and that just quickly helps you know where your missing font or your missing image is located. So that's where this EPS image is, and you have two different options to replace it. You can either highlight, click find, and that kind of opens that same window again. Then you can upload that file, but it's an EPS, so it's not going to work. You can also replace it, or you can also just double click. That'll open this image library. You can search through all of your different images, upload that image. You can as well, let's see if I can, I think I'm going to have to share my whole desktop. Here we go. I'm going to open the PDF of the document. That way I can compare back and forth. And while I'm at it, I can show you guys how to drag and drop. So here's the logo that I want in there. I'm just going to drag it, and then it'll just kind of populate in there. So kind of have a different options of replacing those EPS images. So I think for right now, this is a good place to stop. I know there's kind of a few different questions that have been populating into the comments section. So let's just make sure that we answer those. Let's see. Can you link to images you've already used in previous imports instead of re-uploading? This is a good question. If you've already used it in previous imports. Okay, so I see what you mean. So let's say, you know, I have this specific flyer. It's an 8.5 by 11. If I had another version that's maybe like a postcard, but it's using these same 3 images, you'll still get that pop-up message that says like upload those 3 images. I think it's honestly faster just to click upload. From what I've done, I just upload those image files again. You could, if you wanted to, skip that step entirely. You'll see like those missing images boxes, and then you can just double click on them, search for them in this library, then replace them. But as long as it's the exact same image, Lucipress will recognize when you're uploading those images that, oh, hey, you've already uploaded this image, and it'll just match it with that same image already in Lucipress. So hopefully that kind of answers that question. Lucipress doesn't really link images in the same way as InDesign. It does a little bit, but yeah, I think just the best would be just to upload those images again. Cool. Any other additional questions that anybody has? They can either type it in the chat box, or you can also unmute and ask away. Cool. Okay. So for this next step, we want to compare the InDesign file to the PDF and make sure that it looks exactly like how you intended. So there's going to be some changes that you're going to have to make. And I actually made this file with certain effects. So like you can see these little dots going to like the year built and the bedrooms. There's certain effects in InDesign that, I mean, InDesign just has like a million different features that it has. And so Lucipress, you know, as amazing as it is, it doesn't have every single effect. So like these 3 dots won't come in. So you might have to either change your design a little bit, or if I really wanted those three, those dots in there, I could just type them in. So there's some kind of flexibility that you might have to kind of work with, but maybe kind of adjusting your design will help you think a little bit of, okay, maybe my end users, if they're changing out the year and the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, maybe it's easier actually if I make it as a table or as two different separate text boxes. So you kind of have to think of also your end users, how they're going to use it and what's going to be most easy for them. The other thing that is very, very common that you'll see in almost every InDesign import is line spacing. So you can kind of see up here, house is very close to new, but in LucidPress, it's just not close at all. So you will have to adjust line spacing, and that's only because InDesign has 5 different ways to measure line spacing. And LucidPress has technically 3. We have just kind of this general line spacing, we have top spacing, and then paragraph. So those 3, LucidPress will try to figure out which one to pull from InDesign, but with 5 of them to 3, there's just going to be some discrepancies. But luckily, to me, I'm like, line spacing is the easiest to fix. So all you have to do is click the text box, then just kind of adjust the line spacing. So I think 0.6 looks pretty good. I'm just going to leave it at that. And then I'm just going to kind of double check the other paragraphs, make sure maybe this one I might do one more. Same thing with maybe this one. And then this one, maybe I want to expand it a little bit. This is also a good tip here. If you have any layers that are grouped in InDesign, they're going to stay grouped in LucidPress. So if you're trying to click on this text box and it's not working, you can either double click in there, and then you can kind of see you get this nice little pop-up that says, hey, you're now editing a group, and then you can select the image or the text box. The other option would be to just right click, and then you can ungroup those layers. That's typically what I do, just because I just want them ungrouped. So then now I can edit it, increase that line spacing a bit. But other than that, the InDesign import will most of the time get you at least 90–95% of the way. And then you can kind of see a lot of those edits that I have to make is just usually line spacing, maybe fonts, and then any missing images. So pretty quick to kind of get those all finalized in there. So I'm going to close out of that PDF, and then let me just make sure from my notes that I'm kind of covering all of the different tips that I would like. Let's see, we talked about EPS and TIFF files, fonts. Yeah, I think that's good. For editing, just know as well, if you have a lot of text boxes, you can select multiple text boxes. So if line spacing was just really messed up, you can select multiple all at once and then edit the spacing kind of all together. So just kind of know that that is an option as well. And if you have a ton of grouped settings, what I do is I click on this gray part, and then I just drag my cursor so that I select the whole document, and then you can just ungroup everything. So if anything's grouped, you can just ungroup everything, and then you're just kind of good to go. You don't have to worry about it. Looks like we have another thing in the chat, so let's just double check. I noticed the command Shift G was ungroup. That's the same in InDesign. Do the shortcuts transfer over to? You can see a list of all of our shortcuts appear under Help hotkey. So this is literally all of our different shortcuts. For the most part, I think we keep them consistent from InDesign to LucidPress. If there's one that you're like dying to have, just let us know, because then we can put that in as a request, and I'm pretty sure this is easy to add. So yeah, I definitely use the group and ungroup hotkeys a lot, along with like bringing to front, bringing to back. They're very easy once you kind of have those memorized. Yeah, great question. Cool. Let's see, it looks like we have another one. Cool. Okay. So from here, now that we have it in Lucidpress, looking exactly like our original InDesign file, now is kind of jumping into templates. So anytime you're doing a template, let's kind of go back to this little slide. Here's kind of my checklist of what I recommend before you convert any document to template. So the first step will be to add smart fields. From there, you can provide different notes or kind of instructions for your end users. And then you can create different page templates if that's relevant. And then you can apply locking. So I'm going to kind of go through each of these and just kind of show you the steps for that. So smart fields are awesome, but they really do depend on your industry and the actual template that you're using. Not every template will need smart fields. So this really is just kind of a document by document basis. A good indicator that you can put in a smart field is contact information. So we have on this real estate flyer, it says like, hey, call so-and-so at this phone number. If I wanted to, I could swap this out with a smart field so that whoever picks this template, it's going to recognize who's logged in and it's going to show their information in the flyer without them having to do anything. So that type of smart field is called a profile smart field. So if I wanted to do that, I would just highlight this phone number. I'm going to go up here to the top, click Insert, Smart Fields, and then I want it to pull from the person's profile, whoever's logged into Lucidpress. So I'm going to say cell phone. So you can see automatically it's pulling in from my account and kind of populating that cell phone, and you have those little brackets there. You can do the same thing with the name as well. So we'll go to Insert, Smart Fields, Profile, Full Name. So this could be really handy on business cards. You know, an end user wouldn't even have to touch the template. It would just pull in their title, phone number, email, all of that without them having to do anything. So that's kind of the best example of a profile smart field. You can as well insert a team smart field. So that's what this next one is. Team smart fields are kind of interesting because they, you know, whatever is in a team smart field, so like city, it's going to be the same across every single user. So regardless of who's logged in, it's going to show that same city. So team smart fields are really only useful if you have like corporate level information, like maybe you have a terms of service that goes in every single document at the footer or something, or if you have like your slogan or your company name, that's something that's the same regardless of who's logged in, and so it will show that information. The real benefit of Team Smart Fields is, let's say, in the event our slogan changes, as an admin, I can log in, change the slogan, and it's going to update across every single template, every single document for all of the users. So that's really kind of what's nice about Team Smart Fields is in the future, if any changes happen, you can just do it once and it'll apply. Custom Smart Fields are the next one. It's the exact same as Profile Smart Fields, but we only have these ones as kind of default. And if there's anything that you want that we don't have, you can add it as a custom one. If you're from the 2000s and you're trying to add a fax number, you can add a fax number. Or you can do a department, contact info, anything like that. These other ones, you can see I have a ton, are related to our data automation feature. So let me highlight that real quick. That's what this button is over here on the left. You can connect, basically you can see how many I have. I have a ton of different ones. You can connect a Google Sheet that has a ton of information that you can just directly import to Lucidpress. So a lot of the time this would be useful if you have like an employee directory. For real estate, it would be property listings. You can do it for, I've seen it for different locations. So if you have multiple offices, you can have a Google Sheet with all those offices information. And then if someone's making a flyer real quick, they can pick a row and say, hey, I'm doing this flyer for this location. And then the whole flyer will populate with that address, that contact info, whatever is in that Google Sheet. So those are really awesome. And if you guys have questions at the end about data automation, I can kind of explore a little bit more in depth with that. So that's kind of a high overview of smart fields. Not every template, like I said, will have those, but those are good things to kind of insert. The next step will be to provide notes. So this is something that maybe you're not fully aware of. So I hope this is a bonus tip for those who are kind of pros in Lucipress. Let's say with this image, we wanted to give some additional instructions for our users. You can just right click, and then down here at the very last one is add a note, and you'll get this cool little message box. And what I do is I just put like, hey, here's some instructions, like to replace this image, double click. And what's cool is you can also format this. You can kind of make it a little bit bigger. I don't know why the default is like size 9, but so what's cool is these notes won't technically appear on the document itself. It's kind of this nice little icon. So your users can just click on it, kind of see what the instructions are. They can replace the image. So I've seen people do this for kind of instructions if they have to download it a certain way with like a different color profile, or if they want specific instructions on how to post to social media or change a text box. I don't know. So those are really helpful for your end users, just make sure that they actually know what they're doing and kind of feel comfortable. So you can add notes to multiple objects. So just kind of know you can add more than one note. From there, you can create page templates. This is also really cool, and I hope this is something that is new for a lot of you. Let's say we have different versions of our flyer. So I'm just going to duplicate this one. Let's say maybe I have a fourth image that's right here. So I have, basically it's the same flyer, but this one has 3 images, this one has 4. So you can create different page templates within one template. So I can just right click on this one. I'm going to say create template from page. And I'm going to label this one maybe as 4 images. And that will save it over here on the left in the page button. So you can create as many page templates as you would like. They'll live only in this template. So they won't show up if you have like a business card template. So you can create this one. I'm going to name this one 3 images. And then that way you have different options for your end users. So maybe you make another blank page in here and you kind of provide maybe some instructions on like, I've seen people do it this way where they have like a blank page like this. You could put it in something like this, but for this case, I'll just show you kind of another option. And they kind of just say, hey, like there's other versions of this template, click the page button on the left, kind of see different versions that you can select from. So what I've seen other customers do this is for postcards. A lot of customers who have like the front page is always the same, but then maybe the back page has different variations. You can have all of those. I've seen that very common. Business cards are also common. Flyers like this, where you have 3 versus 4 images. Social media as well, if you want to have like a Facebook versus an Instagram size, kind of have different sizes in there for them to select from. So really handy to kind of have some of those different page templates. And then the very last one will be to apply locking. So this is definitely something you'll want to do at the very end, or you'll kind of run into the problem like I have where you lock stuff down and then you're like, oh man, I want to add another text box, or I actually wanted to swap out this, and then you have to unlock everything again. That's kind of this tedious challenge. So I just recommend save locking for the very end, and it'll kind of save you some time. So locking is also very straightforward. My bonus tip for locking is to come up here to the top right. If my window is a little bit bigger, the lock button would show up over here, but it's kind of condensed in this more section. So you'll click the lock, and then click on this tiny little pin icon over here in the corner. This is literally a time saver. It's the best thing. When I figured it out, I like shock all of our salespeople when I show them it, because they're like, you're constantly like having to go up there, click the lock button, come back. So with this, it keeps the lock window open. That way you can lock down all of your different layers really quickly. So if we expand these out, with an image, we can lock down the size and position so they aren't moving it around or resizing it. You can also lock down the style of the image so they're not adding a shadow or a border, changing the opacity. And then content, this sometimes gets people a little hung up. Content refers to whatever is inside of this box. So for an image, if you lock down the content, they won't be able to swap out this image. But in this case, maybe I want to leave it unlocked. That way they can double click and replace an image with something else. But maybe for my logo, I'm going to select both of those. I don't want them to move it. I don't want them to edit the style, and I don't want them to swap it out with anything. So that's kind of where that comes in handy. For text boxes, you do have to think a little of how the template's going to be used. So for this title, you really have to think like, okay, are they ever going to change new listing? Or are they ever going to say like open house or something like, check out this cool, amazing house that's on the market? If they're going to be typing in something super long, you want to make sure that the text box is as wide or as long or as short as you want it to be. So that's kind of my bonus tip there, is just really kind of think of what the longest title will be, especially if you're locking the size and position. Because this means no matter if they start typing in some long like this is, you can see the text is going to run off and it's not going to show up on the flyer. So just kind of double check on that. One way to kind of go around that is in the style. So if you choose to lock down everything about the style, they won't be able to change the font size. But my tip here is maybe you just lock down these other options and then they can still adjust this font size. And so maybe if this is something super long, they can come in here, make it a little bit smaller. They're not changing the font or anything, but at least they can edit the font size. So that's kind of my tip there. Same thing with kind of these other ones. If there's like paragraphs, you might want to make sure they're extended as much as possible, but then you can lock those down. Content, again, refers to whatever is inside of the box. So if you leave that unlocked, they'll be able to come in here, delete that paragraph, type in whatever they want. If you don't want them to, obviously, you would lock down the content. So be sure to lock down all of these different layers in every single template, just so that no one's accidentally changing this background to like a different color. Just make sure that everything's locked. And my tip for that is to go up here to View, and then you can go to Show Locking. And this will just quickly highlight everything on your document that has been locked. So you can just quickly tell like, oh, I totally forgot to do everything down here. So this is kind of what I do kind of at the end, just make sure everything is locked down. And we'll just turn that back off. The other thing, maybe you have a certain template where really an end user is only changing like maybe 1 or 2 text boxes, or maybe like 1 image. You can do that same trick where you highlight everything and you can just lock down everything all at once. So that just makes it a lot faster. Then you can say, okay, they're actually editing this text box, and maybe this one. And then you can edit that one. So it's just very quick. You can get a lot faster done if you just kind of select everything and then unselect whatever you might not want fully locked. For additional locking, you can lock down the page. So if you have this window open, you'll get all of our different page settings. So you can prevent the page from being deleted. This is helpful if you have like maybe a long brochure or a newsletter or magazine has a lot of pages. Maybe you lock down the cover and the back page, but all those other pages, you know, they can kind of delete or rearrange as needed. So that's where this comes in handy. Prevent adding content means they can't come over here and add a new text box. Kind of see this different error that they're going to get. For images, they can't add like another image to this file. It's just not going to let them. If for whatever reason, like let's say maybe we unlocked content for this image, they can still replace this image, but they can't add, you know, that fourth image in front of it or something. The last one is lock properties and settings. I do this one kind of at the very end so that it locks down the page size, the background color, so that your end users aren't messing with that. And then as of, I think last Wednesday, we just came out with a document lock setting. So if you don't have anything selected, you just click on this gray background, you'll get it over here on the left or on the right, and then you also get this little window will have the same setting. So this is really cool. You can lock it down. It means they can't add or delete pages. So what's really big is that adding a blank page. If they try to click add, it's going to give them this error that they can't add a blank page. So this is something brand new. We knew it was something a lot of customers were requesting. So now you don't have to worry about them adding a blank page in your template. This is a good stopping point. So I'm going to kind of go through the chat again, kind of see what other questions we might have. So let's see. Can you show how to bring up the hovering lockbox again? Yes, that's definitely the best setting right there. So all you'd have to do is just click more, click the lock, and then just click that pin in the corner, and then that'll keep that window open. And I believe you can do that with other settings. I haven't really done it that often. I think it's because I have everything locked down. This is why you might not want to lock until you're fully done. Okay, so let's see. If I come over here, okay. So yeah, if you have like text options, you can come up here at the top and pin certain stuff. So you can have that open. Kind of different options over here that you can pin, keep it pinned, and just keep it open. So if there's some things that you're just like constantly changing colors, and those are kind of nice just to have open and just quickly go through. You lock down everything but size on the house for sale. Do the same locking parameters also happen to new listings since they're in the same container? Yes, awesome question. So if I lock down this text box, it's going to lock the same settings for this font versus this font. If you do not want your end users to mess with that, or just, I don't know, sometimes they just delete everything and then they start typing it in and then it's the wrong font. What I would recommend is making these into two different text boxes. The shortcut is, I think if you hold Option on your keyboard, you can just drag and it makes a copy. I think that's the same for Photoshop and InDesign. So like if you have this image, you can click Alt or Option, and then it just creates another copy. So that's kind of my trick there, very quick. You can also use Command C and Command V to paste. So kind of those. So what I would do, make a copy, delete that bottom section, maybe make this text box a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to delete this top, delete that, and then make that a little bit smaller and then move it. And then now you can lock this differently than that. And then that way they're not changing it from Oswald, and then this one will always be that Able font. So great question. Any other additional questions about locking or any of these other topics that we covered about smart fields, providing notes, page templates, anything like that? Let's see. Okay, was that because they were designed in the box, or was that the result of importing? Yeah, so this was this text box in InDesign, it had both of those fonts in there. And so when it imports, it'll import it all into the same text box. I would recommend, especially if you're having a lot of font errors, or maybe it's importing to Lucipress and it's doing a bold version instead of like a regular or a light version of the font. My trick for that would be to make sure that in InDesign, all of your different text boxes are in separate containers. So even this one, I would separate those into two different ones. That way it'll come in a lot cleaner and faster into Lucipress. That's what I would recommend. Okay, can you show us the connection between data automation and the options you see when you're making the flyer? Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. What is a good example of this one that I have already? You know what? I'm going to log into my other account for this one. So give me 1 second. Almost there. Okay. Cool. Okay. So resume share. Awesome. So we work with a lot of YMCAs. They're kind of one of our big customers. So we have a ton of flyers that we've kind of made for them. I'm going to use this flyer template to just kind of show you the possibilities of data automation. But first, let me open the Google Sheet that I have for it. I think it's called CA Employee Directory Co-branding. That's what it is. Okay. So this is kind of how I made this this Google Sheet, where I wanted to be able to have all of the different locations, since a lot of YMCAs will have different ones, and so they'll have maybe one in this city, this city, this city, and this city. So they have like maybe a short version of their name and then also a long version. So you kind of see they've added Family YMCA to the end of it. So this is something very common. Then they have a row for their address, a row for their phone number. You can also put an email, their website. Literally the possibilities are kind of endless. You can add literally whatever columns are relevant for you. And then let me show you the other one that I made with kind of their employee directory. Let's see. I think this one is actually different. You can do one where it's like all of your different employees in there. So you can have a name, title, email, phone number, location, whatever is relevant for the employees. So if we go back into this template, click done. This one is a good example because it's a flyer where two different locations are kind of hosting an event. So they kind of want both of their information to show up on the flyer. So if I hover over here, we have two different smart fields. Purple indicates that it's a profile smart field. So I've made myself a Salt Lake Family YMCA. So it's pulling from my account and populating my branch name. And then this blue one indicates that it is a data automation or Google Sheet smart field. So you can see that same column name is the same one that's from this Google Sheet. So these essentially will be your different smart field names that will be inserted to the document. And then also down here, you can kind of see I have my profile smart field so that it's showing my name, the address, and then a general phone number. And then over here, we have the second location that has a name, address, and the phone number. So what's really cool is from an end user perspective, if they click on a template and they want to be able to co-brand it with their location, we can come over here. You can see we have additional tabs, and you'll get each one for each Google Sheet that you upload. So here is my locations one, here is my employee directory. So if I click on the locations one, I'm going to say, okay, I'm actually Round Rock, we're partnering with them. I'm going to apply to the document, and it populates all of their information in there. So it's pulling directly from that Google Sheet, kind of applying it really quickly. You don't have to copy and paste or think about what's the address, Google it, search for the phone number, all that is just directly in there. For a directory, I think I did it for, maybe it was this one. Let me preview it. Maybe it was this one. I don't remember. I don't know. Well, with the employee directory one, it would be very similar if you had like contacts so-and-so. You could insert it with a Google Sheet, and then let's say, hey, this is actually John Doe. John Doe's making this flyer. I want them to contact him if they have any questions. It'd be the exact same thing. They would just select a row. They could also search. So if you have like a ton of employees in your directory, you can just search and then click apply, and then it'll populate with all of his information. So that's kind of how that would work. We have a bunch of questions, so I'm going to make sure we answer those. Let's see, I'm eager for data automation, Smart Field 2, since Google Sheet, does that mean the data will also update in Lucipress in real time? Yes, if you choose the Google Sheet option, I know there might be some real estate agents on the line. They have a very similar data automation feature where it's connected to their properties. That one I think updates, I know at least every 24 hours. If not, I'm pretty sure it updates every time you start from a new template. So I can kind of double check on that. From a Google Sheet, yeah, anytime you make an edit, like let's say employee directory, or no, we'll go into this co-branding one. Let's maybe change, I did Round Rock, we'll do Castle Rock. And here. Yeah, if you make these updates, hopefully they'll sync pretty quickly. It's pretty much real time. I'll refresh it. Okay, so Round Rocks, maybe it just hasn't updated quite yet. It's usually pretty quick. Let's see, co-branding, update. I wonder if it logged me out. So sometimes when I have all these different tabs open, it logs me out of Lucipress, but let's see. Still shows Round Rock. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm not fully logged into this person. But usually what I've seen from Google Sheets is they'll update, I don't know. I can't imagine any longer than like an hour, so it's pretty quick. So I can double check on that and kind of guys let you guys know what the exact time frame would be, but it's usually within a few minutes of updating that Google Sheet. The other question is, how is the profile smart field already on the flyer? Oh, that's just because I've already created this template before. But let's say, let me just quickly convert these back. What's cool is you can convert smart fields back to text. So you can just right click and do that. So let's say neither of those, like I imported this from InDesign. It would be the same process as kind of what we reviewed before. You would just highlight, click insert, add a smart field, and then once you connect your Google Sheet, that's when they'll show up over here. So then you can say, oh, I want this pull for my employee directory. Here are all of my different columns, and then you can pick the right one. So for this one, I'm pretty sure it was the long one. So then it'll populate in there. To connect your Google Sheet, let me show you that real quick. All you'd have to do is click the data automation button. And then you can see, I think when you first open it, it'll just say like, hey, let's get started. And then there'll just be like a click add data set button. So it'll look just like this. So you can click add data set. Maybe I want this one to be a product spec sheet. This is also something I've seen some customers do. If they have a lot of different products, they can make a flyer that's very generic. And then if it's a different product, they can select that from the Google Sheet, apply it to the whole flyer, and then it kind of updates with everything. So you can name it, and then we'll just click connect. It'll have you upload or log into Google. Once you log into Google, you can just select which Google Sheet it is, and then it'll show up just kind of like this. You can rename it, I think, and then you can say whether or not it's going to be shown. And then you can also change out the icon. We have 3 different ones, this little house one, a person one, and then this kind of like generic data looking one. So you can kind of connect all of those. Let's see what questions we got. What other data sets are available besides Google Sheets? For right now, it is just a Google Sheet that we support. Unless you're real estate, then we would be able to connect with your property listings. From what I understand, we don't have any plans on our roadmap to add any additional data sets from like maybe Excel or something, but for the most part, you can import data to a Google Sheet regardless of kind of where it's located. So hopefully that's not a stopping factor from using data automation for you. If you want to lock brand elements, is that as easy as locking words and pictures? So brand elements, hopefully this answers your question. We have additional locking that you wouldn't find in like a specific template. It's kind of more lock settings that would just apply generally to the whole account. And those settings are located in your brand asset section. We go over here to settings. There's a lot of really, really good lock settings in here that I highly recommend just kind of going through. So you have enable standard templates. This refers to our free Lucipress templates that anyone can use. You might want to turn those off so that your end users don't have access to those. Enable blank documents to be created by users. This is also really nice. So if you don't want them to start from scratch, you want them to always go to a template, you can turn that on or off. You can stop them from importing from InDesign. Just know it won't affect you as an admin. You can stop them from using non-brand colors and non-brand fonts. So a lot of that locking in style can really be kind of alleviated if you have these unlocked or locked. So let's say in this flyer, if they wanted to change this blue color, as an admin, I can see all of these colors and kind of swap it out to whatever I want. For an end user, they're only going to see this top section. So they'll only be able to swap it out with one of those approved brand colors. So that's kind of nice. Same thing with fonts. Of course, it's locked. You can see all of these cool custom fonts and basically upload a new one. For them, they'll only see these brand fonts. So they might go a little crazy and swap it to book or bold or medium, but at least they're kind of staying within kind of those brand fonts that you've uploaded. Let's see, you have different download and print restrictions. So if you wanted to automatically have a CMYK color profile, a default bleed, you can have them not be able to download PDFs or not be able to publish documents to the web, different image restrictions. So a lot of really good locking that you can find in this section. So hopefully that answered your question there. Cool. Okay, so it looks like we have about 5 minutes remaining. So let me double check what we have on this next slide. I'm going to send this slide deck as well, kind of as your resources. So a lot of what we kind of covered with font errors, image errors, smart fields, page templates, our InDesign course, and we also have an InDesign guide. Let me kind of show that as well. locking, and then tables. I know tables are something we didn't have time to cover, but those are also kind of a pain point of importing from InDesign. So you'll have links to all of these. So literally those articles are very in-depth. I've tried to put as much information as possible into those, especially the Smart Fields guide. So if you want to learn more about those, how to add them, how to get more ideas about how you could use them, that's really good. And I have tried to put in a ton of stuff in here as well. For the InDesign Import guide that I have is really just a link to our Help Center article. And I just put a ton of stuff from the course into the guide. So if you just wanted to see everything all on one page, you can quickly see like, okay, am I having an exporting or importing problem? Something with missing fonts or images, common errors that I've seen, pro tips. So literally I try to just pack everything as I can into this article so that you can just kind of quickly find everything. So just wanted to point that out. And that's mostly it. So kind of wrap up as like a finishing touch on everything. Let's go back to this file. Let's say we've added all of our smart fields, our notes, our page templates, and our locking. Now we're ready to convert it to a template. So to do that, you would just click More, Convert to Brand Template. We also have this option to convert it to just a normal template. That just means it's your own personal template. It stays in your account. It's not really going to populate over here in your template gallery. So a lot of the time you really only use this if you just have like a personal template that you use. So we'll click Convert to Brand Template. It'll ask if you want to make a copy of it. I generally don't, just because I don't like to have multiple copies everywhere. So I'm just going to click Convert. You can add different tags in here. So I can say, okay, this is aquatics, or it's actually for fitness. It's a flyer, brochure, all these different tags and categories you can set up for your end users. Add a description. This might also be worth if you have a lot of different page templates. You could say this has other versions that you can take a look at, something like that, so that they can kind of know. And then by default, it's going to share with everybody on your account. If you only want to share with specific users or a group, you'll type in their name there. And then you can also notify them via email if this is something like a new template. So if you're kind of a old Lucipress customer and have a bunch of templates already, you can make a new template, send them via email. That way they can get an alert that there's a new template for them to check out. Once you click Save, it'll move out of My Documents and populate into the template section. So that's kind of a high overview of kind of everything InDesign related. We kind of have time for maybe one more question if anybody has one. If not, I'll try to send as much kind of information right here at the end. So does anybody else have any questions? I'm just going to double check to see if that round rock ever changed. I need to look into that, see why it did it. But well, cool. So thanks everybody for joining. If you guys do have questions, again, you'll have the email that I'll send out later on, and you guys can just reply to that, and I'll be happy to help with whatever questions you might have. So thanks everybody. If you also thought this was helpful, we'll have this same webinar. I'll try to cover a little bit differently as well. It just kind of depends on what people put on that request form. We'll have this next webinar the second Tuesday or the second Wednesday in September.